As outlined in our previous video, the next step in this journey to pay off your credit card is to make sure that your bank account equals what your budget says you should have. This is that first pool of funds that we need to fill up before we can focus on your rainy day fund and before we can focus on paying off your debt. Now, the reason this is so important is because once we get your bank account equaling your budget, we have broken our reliance on our credit card to pay our future expenses, because you should have the money accumulating in your bank so that when your future expenses come up, the money is sitting there ready to pay them. Now, the obvious question from here is, well, how do I know how much I need in my bank account at the end of the month? And that's what we're going to go through in this tutorial today. Now, this tutorial, we're going to have a look at the process we call at Grandma's Jars the end of month summary process. The end of month summary process is where we define exactly how much we should have in our bank account at the end of each month so that we can identify, do we have a surplus or do we have a deficit, and exactly how much that surplus or deficit is. It's a really exciting process because it allows us to quantify exactly where we're at, and it allows us to measure our progress. So let's get stuck into it. There are 4 very important things you need to know to complete your end of month summary. I will start by listing them, and then I will take you through each one in detail. It is important to emphasize here that the bank and credit card balances need to be recorded as of the last day of the month. Not the day before or not the day after. We need those balances as of the last day, because it's on the last day that all of your income has come in, all of your expenses have gone out, and we can now make a direct comparison between what your bank account has and what your budget says you need. So there are 4 things you will need to know. The first one is what is the total of the funds remaining in your jars on the last day of the month. The second thing you need to know is the amount that you've added to your credit card over the course of the past month. We then need to know your everyday allocation. So what do you allocate to your everyday jar on a monthly basis? This should be the same every month, so this shouldn't be too hard to find. And the last thing you need to know is what is the balance of your central working account. So what is the balance of the bank accounts that are holding the money, that is holding the money for your jars? The first thing we need to know to complete the end of month summary is what is the balance of the funds remaining in all of your jars on the last day of the month. I want to be sure that when I'm looking at my phone app that I have physical money backing up what my jars say I have. In this example here, you can see that I have 10 jars. Today is the last day of the month, so with the exception of the everyday jar, all of the jars have some money accumulated that will roll over into next month. The total of these accumulated jars, so when I add together the funds remaining for each jar, is $2,800. The jars summary page on the Grandma's Jars app gives us this information. Here you can see all of Bill and Betty's jars for July 2017. The far right hand side column here gives us the funds remaining at the end of the month. And at the very bottom, circled in red, we can see the sum total of all of these funds remaining added together. So you can see here that Bill and Betty are going to need at least $12,743 in their central working account to make sure that their first pool is full. Now let me reassure you that this is a demonstration budget. Very few people that I work with actually have $12,700 accumulated in their jars. It's more likely to be a figure around the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 than the $12,700. The second thing that you will need to know to complete your end of month summary is what is your monthly allocation to your everyday jar. If you watch tutorial 5 on the ideal bank account structure, you will know that I highly recommend that you isolate your everyday spending money into a separate bank account on the first day of each month. Now, the everyday jar includes things like your groceries, petrol, takeaway, entertainment, bought coffees, bought lunches, and so on. This is where we typically waste so much money. $10 here, $20 there, it all adds up so fast. So isolating this money into a separate account provides us with a really good spending boundary and helps us be mindful of how much we've got left to spend. For this strategy to work, however, you need to make sure that on the last day of the month, your everyday allowance is sitting in your central account ready to be transferred on the first day of the month to your everyday account. The third thing that we need to know is, what did you add to your credit card last month? Now, the easiest way to figure this out, and the way that the Grandma's Jars application figures this out, it simply says what was the balance of the credit card at the end of last month and what is the credit card balance at the end of this month. It subtracts the two to figure out what have you added to the credit card this month. Now, if you pay off your credit card every month, then simply just make this zero. But if you don't, if you've got an ongoing balance that you're looking to pay down, then what you want to look at is, what have I added to the credit card this month? Not what the balance is, what have I added to the credit card this month? People will often ask me, why do I have to add the balance owing on my credit card to this equation? So here's the example that I give them. Let's just say that I have $300 in my grooming jar and a new pair of Gucci shoes I've been looking at for a while come up on sale. Instead of $300, I can now get them for $200. I buy the Gucci shoes on my credit card knowing that I have the money in my bank account to pay off my credit card. And I diligently enter the transaction into my budget. As a result, the balance of my grooming jar drops from $300 down to $100. And the balance of my credit card goes from zero to owing $200. When we get to the end of the month, I still need the $100 to cover my grooming jar, plus I now also need the $200 to pay off my credit card. And that is why we include this credit card amount in this end of month summary process. So in total, there are 3 things that we need to cover in this first pool. It needs to be the funds remaining in your jars, which was $2,800 in the example. We need next month's everyday allowance, which was $1,000 in this example. And we need whatever has been added to the credit card over the last month. And this was the $200 I spent on my Gucci shoes. In total, this is $4,000. In this example, we have $4,500 in the central working account, which means that we have $500 more than we need to fill the first pool. So this $500, this extra $500, is now overflowing out of that first pool. These are true savings because they have come to us after all our expenses have been factored in. These savings can now overflow into our second pool, which is the rainy day fund. Now, if we already have $2,000 to $3,000 in the rainy day fund, then we can use that $500 to start getting stuck into paying off our credit card. Now, I've just shown you the ideal scenario where we have a surplus from day one, but the reality is this isn't what happens for most people. Normally, it takes 2 to 3 months to get that first pool full. So let's just say you only had $3,500 in your central account instead of the $4,500. This would mean that instead of a $500 surplus, we actually have a $500 deficit. So before we can do anything else, we need to use the next couple of months surplus to fill that first pool so that we can have the balance we need to cover our future expenses. Once we get that pool full, then of course, the money will start to flow over that pool and look at building our rainy day fund and paying off debt. Well, I'm hoping this has made sense. This is a really powerful process because it tells you 3 very important things. Firstly, it tells you what you need in your bank account to ensure that as your bills and expenses turn up, you have the money sitting there ready to pay them. It also tells you, have you got a surplus or have you got a deficit? And the third thing it tells you is, well, how much is that surplus or deficit? And it tells you to the dollar. You know exactly where you stand. This is such an important process that we've built it into the new Grandma's Jars application. So in the next tutorial, I am going to take you through exactly how to do these calculations using the Grandma's Jars app.